Can I be honest? I screw up every day. Every day. All day. Every day. Every minute of every day. I'm constantly making mistakes. Constantly. My wife will tell me, don't forget you got to pick up the kid at 2. No, I won't forget. Text me 10 minutes before. Don't forget you got to pick up the kid at 2. It's 2:30. Where am I? Not at school. She's like, what happened between 1:53 and 1:59? I don't know. It was the snake. I don't know what happened. I blew it. I'm solely sorry. I totally blew it. Admit you were wrong. Next, say you're sorry. Let me just ask you this question. When's the last time you told somebody I'm sorry? You say, well, my family doesn't say I'm sorry. Well, show me in the Bible where your family is the example. I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm going to say. The distance between you and your last apology is probably the distance between you and your closest intimate relationship. Did you catch that? The distance between you and your last apology is probably the distance between you and the person you consider the closest in your life. When's the last time you said, I'm sorry? And by the way, just so you know this, you don't say, I'm sorry, now your turn. It's not tennis, it's called relationships, right? And some of you feel like, well, I said I'm sorry. You need to say you're sorry. You need to start with yourself. I'm sorry. Next, you got to receive grace from Jesus. Let me just tell you just this about forgiveness. The hardest person to forgive is yourself. Once you can learn to forgive yourself, you will learn to forgive others. Until you learn to forgive yourself, you will never be able to forgive others. It starts with you. Adam and Eve both felt shame. God said, who told you you were naked? This is what you do with shame. This is what you do with guilt. This is what you do with fear. You give it to God. That's why Jesus Christ died on a cross for you. A horrific, ugly, terrible death for you. So Adam and Eve sin. Adam receives his curses. Eve receives her curses. The snake receives his curses. And then listen to this, animal lovers. God goes and finds an animal and he kills it. And he takes the skins from the animals and he covers Adam and Eve. You're like, oh my gosh, why does God hate animals? God doesn't hate animals. He loves you. You see, what Adam and Eve felt when they sinned from God, listen to this, they felt a need to cover themselves. But no amount of human covering can ever hide our sin. Not from God, and guess what? Not from ourselves. We need a covering from another source. And so in Genesis chapter 3, God begins to paint the picture of how he's going to fix all this. And what he's going to do is he's going to slaughter something. And for a couple thousand years, that something will be animals in a temple. And then one day, it will be his own son. And he will slaughter his son. And his son's blood, listen to me, will cover you from all your sin. That's the gospel. That's the gospel. This week I was talking to a gal in our church, and I just really appreciate her, and I just love her story. She's been a stripper for most of her adult life, and she's trying to change her life. I want to say two things about this. Number one, thank you for being a church that welcomes people who have sin in their lives. I just want to thank you for that. She's come to our church. She's found a community group. She's trying to change her life. But you know what? She can't move on. She can't do it. She's struggling with shame and guilt for the life that she's lived. Listen to me. Her sin may be different than mine, but it's no worse than mine. You got to forgive yourself. And after you've owned it, after you've said I'm sorry, after you've sought forgiveness, guess what you got to do? You got to move on. You got to move on. Some of you are so focused on your rearview mirror, you can't go forward. Here's what you do in relationships. You have courage. You own your crap. You say you're sorry. Here's the sad news. Not everybody's going to forgive you. There are some people that don't go to Sandals anymore. I've hurt their feelings. I've done things. I've sinned. I've made mistakes. I've gone to them. I've owned it. I've said, I'm sorry. I've said, please forgive me. And you know what? They don't care. So what do? You move on. You move on. Don't get stuck in somebody else's unhealth. Don't get stuck in somebody else's sickness. You ask for forgiveness. You make the apology. And if whether it's received, praise God. If it's rejected, move on. Why? God has a plan for your life.